And the entire idea behind the founding of the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council is still an important concept of how do you bring the types of resources and interesting ideas and speakers and teaching out of the university setting and into the community.
They had a team of people here at the University of Iowa that over the previous 3 or 4 years had been working really hard to create international studies and this global studies program directed at undergraduates, but just in general to make Iowa more internationally focused. The international people like Joel Barkin and several others reached out to some of the key business people in downtown Iowa City and others that they knew socially and created a little team that said, let's do something that is going to be really good for people who aren't just university people.
Two downtown bankers, Dick Summerwell and Bud Houghton, had a connection with a lot of the university folks. Both grew up in Iowa City and, knew a lot of people, and so this whole idea came about because they were looking for a way to bring international ideas and exchanges into the community.
The university president at the time, James Friedman, made that a big push of his own to internationalize the University of Iowa. And university leaders got behind it. Some of the initial funding came from the office of what was then the Vice President for Research.
The connection with the university space and personnel in those early years was key. I don't think it would have gotten off the ground if we hadn't had that.
And that then helped get funding through one of the university's major donors, the Stanley family of Muscatine. They created the Stanley University of Iowa Foundation Support Organization, which is basically the channel through which the Stanley family has been supporting international things at Iowa for almost 40 years. And the Foreign Relations Council has continually, year after year, been a part of that.
At that point, it really did come to fruition with very little pushback that I'm aware of. No hurdles, no obstacles. People were really sort of, I think, unanimous in their thought that, yeah, this is a good idea, let's do this.
We live in a city where a lot of people have this interest in the world at large. So we had a lot of pieces in place. So the genesis was to try to find something where downtown people could come on their lunch hours and learn from university people or guests of the university on international topics.
One of the founding ideas was that there were speakers who would come in who weren't regular professors necessarily, but who were here visiting the University of Iowa. Maybe they'd be here for a semester or just for a conference. And so really, I think at the very beginning, the idea was to just tap those people to give a special program in the community.
It was a sort of shoestring operation for the first couple of decades. And one of the key people in keeping things going and making really interesting talks was the then chair of the program committee, Dee Norton.
And Dee was not one of the founders, but certainly one of the first leaders of the group. And his wife, Carrie, is still on the board.
He kept us going as a fairly low level. We didn't have 15 talks per semester like we do now. We had, maybe sometimes 5 or 6 or something. So it was not at the same level of activity that we have now.
Now we really do host 25 or 28 programs a year that are week in, week out during the academic year, and then intermittently even through the summer.
I always have thought, and the more that I think about it, the more I realize that Iowa City is like its own delta and oasis. You can't say, oh, but we're not international in Iowa City. That just means that you haven't looked around very carefully, because there's a lot of different people, different values, different backgrounds here.
There's an amazing group of people in this community that we can draw on, really.
We have a large international Chinese student population. There is a Congolese community, a Sudanese community. It's honestly one of the best deals you can get. The world has literally come to Iowa City.
There's got to be an interest in international relations, and that's pretty widely defined. And I think in this community, there's just a lot of interest. I meet some really interesting people at the luncheons.
The Foreign Relations Council audience, includes retirees. It includes people from local businesses. It includes people, who live throughout the Johnson County area, basically, right? And as well as faculty and the honors students who have made a big impact.
The Iowa City Foreign Relations Council really allows people to connect with one another, whether that's, UI honor students coming in and sitting at a table with a retired professor who served in the Peace Corps in Ghana, or was in UNICEF, or was in the Foreign Service.
The mix is great because some of the young people probably don't have a chance to talk to people that age. So, you know, you can have conversations that you might not have otherwise. We've always got international students that are coming, certainly for business and for liberal arts and for the sciences that come, that may impact how many people can be part of our organization.
Most of the people who attend are already kind of into politics. They're into world affairs. They really want to be knowledgeable at a minimum and maybe active as well.
They've got a chance in many cases to go up after the talk and talk to the person and get some more information or ask some more questions that they didn't get asked.
I think where there's places like Iowa City Foreign Relations Council, those are the places where it's so important to realize that there's a person behind a country. And so I think it's good if people really explore what the world has brought to us.
I would say the significance of the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council fundamentally relates to the way that people connect with people, whether it's scientific or artistic or political or policy related. At the very foundation of what we do and who we are is the idea that we bring people together in a really informal setting.
So we like it when people represent diverse kind of personal backgrounds, especially when they come from other countries and their concerns aren't necessarily just American, so they can sort of shed light on things from a different country's perspective.
The mission of this group to kind of bring these international topics in front of people, I would argue, is even more important than it has been in the past.
At this point, the world is in Iowa City. It is a responsibility to be aware and conscious of these communities.
People who present to us are doing a good job of turning what their expertise is into something that has a larger public meaning. That means that the information that our speakers share with them is potentially going to have this kind of larger impact.
We can all hear from a wide variety of people on any number of topics and hear their real experiences and learn.
You could do something like we do in Chicago or New York or one of the really big cities without the university connection, but in a town of our size, the university plays a big role.
I would have never expected that ICFRC would exist. The only reason I think it does exist is because it's in an academic setting where these thoughts are encouraged. In a way, it's been self-sustaining because it's close to the university.
The university has helped with various kinds of funding, for one thing, but just the talented people that we have here among the faculty and staff. And then the fact that any big university like this brings in outside lecturers and others, guests, visiting people who come, for a month or a year or whatever it might be.
The valuable part is that it does connect the university with the outside community. That has been one of the problems of the university in the past decades, and this is a way that University of Iowa helps bridge that, especially when you have students who are part of the experience, and the people who are not part of the university community can interact with students. They have the feeling, I think, that they're getting a more direct viewpoint into what's going on at the university, and I think that builds a lot of bridges and it helps connect the community.
So I'm also an honors writing fellow, and one of the courses that someone was following was something about international experiences. And it was a bit disappointing because for a lot of the freshmen who took that class, their international experience was eating sushi. And that does nothing to connect you to a community, and it does nothing to put a face on something that you might not be familiar with. And so I think where there's places like Iowa City Foreign Relations Council, those are the places where it's so important to realize that there's a person behind a country.
There is this real increase in interest among younger adults. I think the increase in attendance by students is a reflection of that.
I think what really is going on is that students are realizing the importance of international studies and relations and the impact that it's having on them.
So student participation in ICFRC, attending the luncheons, and actually a number of them have gotten to speak. I think for all of them, it's a great opportunity to learn more broadly about what's going on in the world.
As a student, what's unique about the ICFRC lectures is that it's not a typical classroom lecture. First of all, you're voluntarily going here. I mean, most people say they're paying for their education and they're going to these classes, but there are a lot of prescribed requirements for which classes you have to take, and you might not be interested in all of those.
It's a different structure at ICFRC than a classroom. I don't know if I'd call it lecturing.
We can all connect with the speaker in a way that allows us to hear what they have to say in the more formal remarks, but then engage in a more informal question and answer and create those conversations where students get an idea about the applied use of their, potential career path.
And it's painless in its delivery, in that you are in an informal atmosphere where you have a meal, and I think the meal adds a lot to the experience because it brings this more informal and personal tone to the whole experience.
One of the great things about ICFRC is the diversity of the speakers. I mean, you don't just have professors coming in like you would at a lecture at the university, but you have artists, you have journalists, you have just everyday citizens sometimes just speaking about their different experiences, and I think the audience and students have a lot to learn from that.
Students will take 5 or maybe 6 courses in a semester, and here you have 15 different topics, maybe totally different from any of your course topics.
The draw for at least some of the students is that the speaker and the topic are something they're not familiar with. So there's this exotic nature to the ICFRC, I think, that draws people in.
People always think our students who are attending ICFRC are there because they are studying international relations or they're studying politics. And it turns out commonly they're a much broader perspective than that.
The topics of the lectures themselves are more interesting than a typical lecture. Not only are the audience that are going interested in the topics, but the people who speak are as well. It's their passions. They want to talk about this. They chose the topic.
The professor gets to talk about what they enjoy, which is their research, and they get to share the research. And by giving you what's the most interesting, the most prominent research that's happening, or discoveries that are happening, and then from there you can just branch off in many directions.
The topics that are at issue sometimes are very controversial. For example, we had a speaker on whether the election was interfered with by the Russians, a very loaded topic at that particular time especially. Here we are talking about a very sensitive issue, and yet we are talking about it publicly, and we're doing it in a way that is civilized and productive also. That's what I would say is another valuable piece of ICFRC for the students, but also for all the participants.
In the lecture hall, it's like, let's go backwards and understand the theory, which is very important if you are a student of that discipline. But if you're not, like I have no background in 3D designing, but if there was someone who came in and gave a speech on 3D designing, she can just go straight into it and I can learn, and then my interest will be piqued and I'll be like, okay, I will look into that more.
You can really see the passion of the speakers in what they're speaking about, and I think that transfers onto the audience.
I think opportunities like this really open our students' perspectives on kind of the what if. Where could my education take me? And in that way, students going to something like this, the chance to see themselves in some of the other speakers and these issues that are really important to them, they think, oh, I don't think I'd ever be able to do that. All of a sudden they see a speaker and they say, I see myself in that, and I could see myself doing this for a career. So I think in that way, with our perspective on opening educational boundaries for all of our students, ICFRC really helps in that way.
Now I'm realizing, because I'm going to be graduating next May, like different elements of like a community that I want to be part of, and wherever I end up, I hope that there will be something like ICFRC where just like on a weekly basis, I know that I can be stretched or learn about a different part of the world or a different discipline or a different field. I hope that something like that exists, because I think the fact that Iowa City does have something that happens so consistently and covers a broad range of topics is such a vital part of the community because you can grow in so many ways through that.
As a small token of our appreciation, we're going to present each one of you with our coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug.
We present you with the coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug. It's all yours. Thank you.
Kevin, as a small token of our appreciation, we wish to present you with the coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug. You may, we hope the coffee.
We present you with the coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug.
Thank you very much.
You will be just so shocked to receive this coveted mug. With the very coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug.
Thank you. I'll have my first coffee in this.
We've got the coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug, and you'll be collecting these at quite a rate these days. So.
We have a mug for you to drink your British tea. It's very, very coveted.
We will give you yet again another very coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug, and I'm looking forward to being able to give you another highly coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug in the future when you come speak to us again. So.
I want to present you with the coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug.
Wow,
thank you.
So Laura, when you come here in person, we will give you our highly coveted mug.
Oh, all right.
We owe you a mug. Thank you very much for your time.
Right. Well, thank you guys for coming to listen.
It's my pleasure to be able to present to you the highly coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug.
We thank our members, volunteers, and interns for making these forums possible since 1983, when Sally Ride became the first American woman in space aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger.
Since Vanessa Williams became the first African American Miss America in 1983.
Since the year when Lotus 123 was released in 1983.
Since 1983, when, wait for it, McDonald's introduced McNuggets.
Since 1983, the last year that Robert Ray served as governor of Iowa. Makes you somewhat nostalgic, doesn't it?
Since 1983, when the heavy metal group Kiss appeared in public for the first time without makeup. I'm not sure I would have wanted to have seen that. But.
Since the year that the Space Shuttle Challenger made its maiden flight, 1983.
Great. Well, the time has come to conclude today's programs. On behalf of the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council,